All right, so let's get to it. Andrew Bryan was born a slave in 1737 at Goose Creek, South Carolina, about 16 miles from Charleston. He was later brought to Savannah, Georgia, where, as stated above, he came under the influence of George Lowe. He at first commenced by public exhortations and prayer meetings at Brampton. 9 months after the departure of George Lowe, Bryan began to preach to congregations of black and white people at Savannah. So remember, you're looking at integration in the 18th century. You got black and white people at these churches. Moved by his convincing message, his master and other whites encouraged him in his chosen field. Inasmuch as the influence he had upon slaves was solitary, excuse me, solitary. Anyway, he was thereafter permitted to erect pause on the land of Mr. Edward Davis at Yamacraw, a rough wooden building of which his group was soon artfully dispossessed, as his ministrations were opposed by others who did not like this simple faith. Unusual persecution soon followed. Of course it did. Bryan's adherents were not permitted to hold frequent meetings, and in trying to evade this regulation by assembling in the swamps, they ran the risk of rigid discipline. With the aid of his brother, Samson, Andrew Bryan, however, gradually held this group together. At first, it was small, but finally sufficiently large to receive the attention of the Reverend Thomas Burt in 1785, and that of Reverend Abraham Marshall of Keokee in 1788. The latter then baptized 45 additional members of this congregation, and on January 20th, 1788, organized them as a church and ordained Andrew Bryan as a minister with full authority to preach the gospel and to administer the ordinances of the Baptist Church. This recognition of Bryan as a minister, however, did not solve all of his problems. The greater his influence among the slaves, the more the masters were inclined to believe that his work could result only in that of servile insurrection. Of course. Of course. This is exactly what Sammy was talking about when it came down to the Baptist Wars. It became more difficult, therefore, for slaves to attend his meetings. The patrols whipped them, sometimes even when they had passes, and finally a large number of the members were arrested and severely punished. Jeez. The culmination was that Andrew Bryan, their pastor himself, and his brother, Samson Bryan, one of the first deacons, were, quote, inhumanely cut, and their backs were so lacerated that their blood ran down to the earth as they, with uplifted hands, cried unto the Lord. But Bryan, in the midst of his torture, declared that he rejoiced not only to be whipped, but would freely suffer death for the cause of Jesus Christ. So this is what I'm trying to tell y'all. Like, when it came down to being Christ-like, they was taking it to the extremes. And yo, you gotta respect it. In the face of persecution, you still held your faith. I mean, at the end of the day, isn't that the entire point? Isn't that what Jesus did? Like, Jesus claiming that he's the Son of God, and people telling him that he's a charlatan, he's a liar, and all this other stuff, and he's still steadfast on the truth. And Andrew Bryan did the same thing. They literally was whipping him. It sounded like to death, and he still stood on his principles as a religious man, as a Christian man. You got to respect that. Accused of sinister plans, we're right here. Andrew Bryan and his brother Samson were, upon the complaint of their traducers, imprisoned and dispossessed of their meeting house. Lorenzo Dow, an eccentric itinerant preacher appearing in Savannah about this time, preached at Bryan's church to show not only his compassion for Bryan's waiting congregation, but his disapproval of the persecution to which this apostle was subjected. Jonathan Bryan, the master of Andrew and Samson, insisting that they were the victims of prejudice and wickedness, however, secured for them a hearing. Okay. They came before the justices of the inferior court of Chatham County, Henry Osborne, James Havisham, and James Montague, who, finding no criminal intent in their efforts, ordered that they be released. They were then permitted by their master to resume worship in the barn on his plantation, but persecution followed them even there, where they were surrounded by spies and eavesdroppers. Jeez, they just preaching the gospel. All they doing is preaching. They like they going, you whipping them, you're jailing them. Man, shout out to the people that was on the right side of history, but sheesh. This continued until one of the eavesdroppers, upon listening to what was going on among the communicants at Andrew Bryan's private home, heard this man of God earnestly praying for the men who had so mercilessly used him. This enlisted so much sympathy among the people kindly disposed, that the chief justice of the court, before whom they had been brought, granted them permission to continue their worship of God at any time between sunrise and sunset. They held meetings at Brampton about 2 years, during which they made a number of influential friends among the whites, who, along with the communicants of this group, assisted Bryan in raising funds to purchase a lot upon which to begin the erection of a church in 1794. The first African church stood for years on this lot on what is now known as Mill Street, running to Indian Street Lane in Savannah. Andrew Bryan faced another crisis upon the death of Jonathan Bryan, his master. A crisis. I mean, I guess, whatever. Like the way, like I ain't gonna lie, like the objectivity sometimes be like, word, like I get it. You feel me? Like it doesn't shock me or nothing like that. But when I be hearing like how objective the ancestors be talking about slave owners and stuff like that, it's like this is what I mean about the ancestors having principles. Because despite the of course the inhumane institution of slavery, the ancestors still viewed and talked about these people as humans. Some of them, called them tyrants and all of that stuff when it was deserved. However, like when it comes down to this stuff, it was like his slave owner dying is a crisis for him. Like we're gonna learn why there was a crisis, probably, but it's just the way that they talk about these people. It's like night and day when it comes down to back then and, contemporarily referring to these people. Now, of course, I'm no slave owner sympathizer at all. I'm big on the slave revolts and the slave rebellions. Like, hey, man, you chose what you chose. So if you die by that, I mean, it is what it is. Can't be out here enslaving people thinking shit is going to be sweet. Anyway, he succeeded, however, in emerging as a free man, the heirs of the estate having given him an opportunity to purchase his freedom for £50. Fortune prospered him thereafter. No duh. To the extent that he soon bought in Yamacraw a lot on which he built a residence not far from the place of worship. Upon the final division of the Bryan estate, it developed that the church building was still controlled by that family, but the worship of these communicants continued there under the supervision of the whites without serious interruption. The membership had then reached 700. Bryan soon obtained a position of influence in spite of all his difficulties, as is evidenced by his own testimony in addressing his co-worker, Dr. Ripon, in 1800. He said, quote, "With much pleasure I inform you, dear sir, that I enjoy good health and am strong in body at the age of 63 years and am blessed with a pious wife, whose freedom I have obtained, and an only daughter and child who is married to a free man, though she, and consequently under our laws, her 7 children, 5 sons and 2 daughters, another good ratio, are slaves." What? So he's free, his wife is free, so they didn't buy his daughter's freedom just yet. And because the status of you is based upon the status of your mother, the kids were slaves. Because like the father's free, both of her parents are free, and her husband is free, but she's still enslaved. Therefore, the 7 children are enslaved still. All right. So, I mean, it is what it is. I'm not going to say it's all good. But, I mean, I guess that's the law. By a kind providence, I am well provided for. As to worldly comforts, though I have had very little given me as a minister, having a house and a lot in the city, besides the land on which several buildings stand, for which I receive a small rent, and 50 acre tract of land with all necessary buildings, 4 miles in the country, and 8 slaves, for whose education and happiness I am enabled through mercy to provide. See, this is what I'm saying. These black men had slaves. I'm not reading this wrong. You feel me? Like, I'm not reading this wrong at all. Like, when it comes to this stuff, you'll see the objectivity come from people who also understood that they either had slaves themselves, black people, or they knew black people who owned slaves. That's going to have to be where a large part of the objectivity is coming from. Like, you not tripping the way I'm tripping in 2025 about slavery because black slave owners. Because, like, that's, son, he's not, like, the way he's even describing his daughter's enslavement is like, yeah, me and her mother are free. You know what I'm saying? She my only child. Me and her mother is free, but she, unfortunately, as a young woman, is not free. We haven't paid for her freedom yet. And I ain't gonna hold you. She married now. Her husband should be the one freeing her. You feel me? They got 7 kids together, but he ain't thinking about freeing her. He need to be getting his chips up so he can buy her freedom. But also, I have 8 slaves. Like, yo, man. Oh, man, history is so crazy. Just in this page alone, you get a real glimpse of why I love studying history so much. Because that was super crazy. Like, I'm free. My wife is free. My daughter's not. Her husband is. And then my 7 grandchildren are enslaved. And also, I have 8 slaves myself who I pay for their education. And I'm making sure they're happy and all this other stuff. It's like, yo, when it comes down to this, it's like, what can you say, son? It's like, all right. Like, you walking into, 18th century, or this might be the very top of the 19th century, South Carolina or Georgia, wherever he is. And it's like, you walk to his crib and you see he's receiving rent. He's a landlord. He has a family, but he also has 8 slaves. Like, this is a black man, preaching black man. As this congregation continued to increase, yeah, I'm person to probably, yeah. So as this congregation continued to increase, Andrew Bryan secured the services of his brother as an assistant pastor. He planned, moreover, to divide the church whenever the membership became too large for him to serve it efficiently. This was what led to the organization of the Second African Baptist Church of Savannah. So yeah, that was in Georgia, with Henry Francis, a slave of Colonel Leroy Hamilton, as pastor. As the head of this congregation, Francis manifested power of remarkable leadership and soon thereafter purchased his freedom to devote all of his time to his congregation. Bryan's church was further divided upon reaching the stage of having an unwieldy number when there emerged from it the Third African Baptist Church. So basically, they're like, this is like franchising. It's like, okay, so the first African Baptist Church, first Black American Baptist, whatever you want to name it, like the number is growing large, and I can't have hundreds of people in my congregation. It's better to be like, oh, listen, we'll build another church to where you guys can still have that intimate relationship, not only with your fellow congregation, but also to the pastor of the church. So that way we can still do our jobs effectively and efficiently. So that makes sense. So now they're on their third African Baptist church. Bryan's church, moreover, became in course of time the beacon light in the Negro religious life of Georgia. So now he's becoming the man. That's what it's looking like. Andrew Bryan is looking like the man as it pertains him, his brother, his peoples. They are becoming like the most popular people as far as Christianity goes in Georgia. From this center went other workers into the inviting fields of that state. As to Augusta, where a flourishing Baptist church was established. This condition obtained until the Negro preacher became circumscribed during the 30s and 40s by laws intended to prevent such disturbances as were caused by Nat Turner in Southampton County, Virginia. Andrew Bryan, however, did not live to see this. He passed away in 1812, respected by all who knew him and loved by his numerous followers. The position which he finally attained in the esteem and the respect of the community is well illustrated by the honor shown him by the following resolutions of the Savannah Baptist Association, white, on the occasion of his death. I love Carter putting white in parentheses like that. Like, these were some crackers that said this. So let's read the quote. Quote, the association is sensibly affected by the death of Reverend Andrew Bryan, a man of color and pastor of the First Colored Church in Savannah. This son of Africa, after suffering inexpressible persecutions in the cause of his divine master, was at length permitted to discharge the duties of the ministry among his colored friends in peace and quiet, hundreds of whom, through his instrumentality, were brought to a knowledge of the truth as it is in Jesus. He closed his extensively useful and amazingly luminous course in the lively exercise of faith and in the joyful hope of a happy immortality. So this is what white people had to say about a black man in 1812. Fellow Christians, so, it is what it is.